The Three Down Greencast is brought to you by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, Regina's only downtown brewery. Well, another week, another cold take that we have to expose here on the Three Down Greencast by my aggressively average co-host John Fraser. As now, this wasn't one that you missed on the podcast last week. There is still the possibility that he could have a cold take turn hot. Based on that one, we'll get into that in a second. But when I turned off the microphones last week, once I hit stop on record, we started talking about the World Series because John is, for some reason, a big Boston Red Sox fan.
Massive Red Sox fan, my whole life.
So we started talking about it, and I said, I don't have any skin in this game. I quite frankly don't like either team that much. I just hope it's a good series, but I don't think it's going to be. Everything suggested is going to be a quick series for the Boston Red Sox. And you're like, no. Even though the Sox are up 2-0 at this point, you said the series is coming back to Boston. And, well, once again, John, you were proven wrong.
It's true. But that time, that was me trying to avoid jinxing my team, right? It's the same as the thing that I just can't admit the Bombers are a good football team. I can't say to you, oh, yeah, no, you're right, Joel. They're totally going to wrap this up in 5 games. It's over. You just can't do it. You can't put it out in the universe. But, yes, add it to the cold take total. So that now means I'm at, 274 cold takes and 1 hot take?
Maybe. I don't remember what that correct hot take would be. But a broken clock is right twice a day, as the old saying goes, right? So there must be one in there somewhere along the line that you got right at one point or another. I just don't remember it. Maybe that was on your previous podcast rather than this one.
Oh, no, I have the coldest of takes on my previous podcast when I was with the 2 and Out CFL podcast. The coldest of takes said the Riders will win 2 of the next 3 Grey Cups after they hired Chris Jones.
I remember that one, yeah. I remember that one quite.
Yeah. No, that one is still icy cold.
Yeah, since that's mathematically impossible now in year 3 of the Chris Jones era in Saskatchewan. But you do still have a shot at one hot take turning out one that I'm still not super confident about at this point. But you did still believe that the Calgary Stampeders could lose 4 games in a row to end the regular season. They lost last week again to your Bombers, so that's 3. You're still in the running. You have a bit of an uphill battle this week for that to happen against a BC team with nothing really to play for, unless they really care about Wally Buono's last game in Vancouver. But we'll get into that a little bit later on as we talk about the playoff picture and what's ahead for the Riders after another super game, a really interesting game for the Riders in a lot of different senses. And I think you all know what we're going to be talking about the bulk of this podcast, which was a systematic failure on every single level by the CFL when it comes to the Zach Collaros hit. So to get into all of that, and I think to get us into the proper mindset to properly dissect this and probably torch the league for it, John, what's in the glass this week?
In the glass this week, first off, a big part because of the World Series and not because I'm an alcoholic, I spent the gift card you got me from seeing your wedding, so thank you again, Joel, on a large collection of craft beers and texted you the photo and said, if these are all gone by the time we podcast, you can check me into counseling. But World Series games, one going 18 innings. I was drinking beer the entire time. I've gone from having a lot of beer to not having very many beer. But one of the very many few beers that I do have left is one of my favorites. It is a Rebellion IPA. My 3-year-old son Max likes it because it's got a cool monster on the can, and it is just hoppy and delicious. And I'm really starting to find, although I'm proud to be from Saskatoon, I enjoy being from Saskatoon, I have to say, the quality of craft beers coming out of Regina is just hit after hit after hit. So I highly recommend if you're an IPA drinker. I know some people prefer the double IPA. I've never tried it myself, but the single IPA from Rebellion, nice flowery cans, pops the eye out with Godzilla and a grain elevator.
Yeah, it's one of their classics. They retweaked the recipe a little bit ago, so it's even better now. Just one of those is classic old school hop bomb IPAs that you don't
Yes.
find quite so much anymore. A lot more of bringing out the citrus flavors and that sorts of thing. But that one is definitely still the classic hop bomb and one of my go-tos. For me, I almost went with a Rebellion Oatmeal Stout, but I wasn't really feeling a dark beer tonight for whatever reason. So for me, I am drinking the Pile of Bones Session Ale, just a nice, easy drinking light ale for what's going to be an interesting podcast.
It really is. And again, one of the 2 beers that you had at your rehearsal dinner party that I consumed a copious amount of. Oh boy, so tasty in my mouth. I can still feel the hangover.
Someone else who probably can still feel the hangover right now might be Riders quarterback Zach Collaros, and it's not a happy hangover for him whatsoever. Not that there ever really is one per se, but his situation is far different than having too many beer one night. As we all know the story at this point, it was late in the first quarter when Zach Collaros took a vicious headshot from Lions defensive end Odell Willis, and basically stuff hit the fan from there on every single angle that could have gone wrong on that play did. There was originally no flag on the play. The Riders called timeout and waited and then challenged. Eventually there was the flag, and then it got even crazier as Zach Collaros was allowed to continue in the game somehow, despite the fact that he had clearly dropped to his knee, I believe, like twice in distress. Like, he wasn't there. He clearly was in some form of distress, whether it was a head injury, a neck injury, it doesn't matter. There was something clearly wrong with him, that he was in a lot of discomfort. And he was allowed to play 2 more plays, and the Riders eventually scored a touchdown on the run. And then he was finally pulled from the game, and it just kept snowballing from there. And that basically was, in a lot of ways, the conversation of that football game. And if you haven't read the piece yet, head to 3downnation.com, and I'm not just sucking up to the boss right now. Drew Edwards scorched the league on Monday for their handling of everything that went on in that play and how it was just a complete systematic breakdown on every level. I touched on it a little bit in my post-game piece as well, where I basically went to the point where saying someone should maybe lose their job over this.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Because if the NFL can fire an official in the middle of the season, this seems like something where that spotter should face some kind of consequences for this, because if there was ever a play in the history of football where clearly an injury spotter should have pulled a player from the game, it was this one. Yes, Zach Collaros has to have some fingers pointed at him as well for not speaking up if he was feeling it, and the team certainly deserves some fingers pointing at it as well for maybe not doing it themselves, but there is one person who it is their job to spot these things and pull them out, and they didn't do it. As they say, you had one job, and you didn't do it.
Yeah, and you're right. They absolutely have to lose their job. Well, these people are anonymous. The concussion spotter should totally and absolutely lose their job. As a guy, a bit of my background, I've alluded to it a little bit on this podcast when talking about concussions. I had several when I was playing hockey. I can tell you that the state Zach Collaros in, 100% he was concussed. I don't blame Zach Collaros for staying in, because I can tell you he's a guy that's I once had a head injury to the point that I didn't remember my entire third period of a hockey game.
Yeah.
No idea. I had no idea what I had done. I came back to the dressing room and scolded my teammates for getting undressed, and we haven't won the game yet, and what are you guys doing? Turns out I had been in goal for the entire third period and apparently made 7 or 8 saves. It's just, you just get up. You don't know. Your mind is not there. Your mind is not right. But when it hits you, man, a hangover, Joel, is the best way to describe it. Imagine the worst hangover you've ever had in your life. Ugh. And now imagine that feeling from a head injury. And I can tell you that is, oh God, that is, I don't know. It's terrifying. Like, it's just, I absolutely hate even thinking about it. Think about my past. And I wondered when the CFL announced that, okay, this concussion spotter is going to be a thing. My question was, is somebody really going to have the balls to pull out a quarterback after being hit when his team has a chance to win a football game? And in this spotter's case, it is painfully clear that they did not have the cojones. They were not willing to do their job, do what's best for the player, and pull Collaros out, because I can guarantee you, he didn't want to hear the boos of 33,000 strong in Rider Nation.
Well, in clarification and how the spotter works, I read an article somewhere today about how they're actually in command center in Toronto. They're not in the stadium. They have access to all the angles that TSN provides, even the ones they don't broadcast, and they have access to the all 24 view as well, so they can see the whole field at once. There was really no excuse for missing this.
Yeah.
I do believe that one way to improve this is to actually have people physically in the stadium, because even if you have all the camera angles, there's still a chance you might miss something, and that might have been what happened here. It might have taken them too long to get the angle. If they were in the stadium, they could have seen there was a headshot right away, and then ultimately right away watch Zach Collaros and see that clearly this guy was in some kind of distress and should have been removed from the game. Now, I know there were some comments online on the story that Drew wrote about, a bunch of doctors on Twitter here, and okay, fairness, we don't really know what he was like in that point in time, but the point is that's the whole thing. The spotter is supposed to remove a player who may be in distress and remove them so they can get properly evaluated at that time.
Yeah, because one of the worst things you can ever do, and again, everybody's trying to play doctor on Twitter and, it's hard-nosed football. And I get it. 10 years ago, we had no clue what getting rattled does to your brain.
Absolutely.
I can tell you with my own struggles with not only mental health and post-concussion syndrome, there's a really good chance that came from my brain being absolutely scrambled 5 or 6 times when I was 15 or 16 years old. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no doubt in my mind it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
My brain doesn't work right, and I'm a grown-ass man. Can I prove that's connected to getting knocked the F out 4 or 5 times when I was young? Probably not. When I'm dead, can they prove it? Maybe. I don't know.
There's enough anecdotal evidence that you could suggest that everything that's wrong with you could be tied to this. Some of it anyway.
Exactly. I mean, all jokes aside, though, but I mean, here I am. I suffer from memory loss, short-term memory loss. I suffer from anxiety. I have all sorts of a laundry list of issues, and I went through, my last concussion was as simple as running into somebody at a rec hockey game, an adult rec hockey game. Me and another guy collided, and every time my heart rate got up, I saw black spots for 6 months. Yeah. And got a headache and felt miserable and was a complete and utter crazy person. Like, I was not myself for 6 months, and that's why they brought in these spotters. Because your first instinct is, as anybody that's played any sport at any level, pro, junior, hell, even if it's only rec league, your first instinct is, I got to get up. I got to be there for the boys or girls. I got to be there. I got to get up. I got to finish. That's what I have to do.
Yeah. Well, and that's why in this scenario, while I said a few fingers should be pointed at Zach Collaros and Chris Jones and the medical staff at the time, you understand where they're coming from in the moment where the odds of that actually happening are low. I'm not going to blame a player for wanting to stay in the game. I would applaud a player in that situation who says, you know what, I'm not quite right, and pulled himself from the game. He might take some heat from some Neanderthals out there, but from my side, I'd be like, you know what, you did what's right for you. I know that it sucks for the team in the moment, but they'll get over it, and they'll understand in the long run.
Your teammates would understand all day long. But you brought up the good point of this is like any fan base, especially an older one, like in the CFL. Let's face it. I mean, we could get into that discussion why the CFL fan base is aging and generally older, and guys like you and I in our 30s are in the minority. But older guys like that, it was some smelling salts and rub some dirt on it and you're okay. That attitude comes up and it's disgusting. I have to stay off CFL Twitter when that comes up because it's just it's infuriating with the own struggles I've had. And like, I'm not even talking about playing impressive levels of hockey. I played friggin' minor hockey and this happened to me. Like, it's just, it's absurd and it's frustrating and it's so archaic. And you're right. I would give a standing O. And I can guarantee you every guy in that dressing room would give a standing O if Collaros had gone to the sidelines and said, I'm not right. But the scary part is that's a sign that you are concussed. Is you don't know you're not right.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Your body goes on some sort of really, again, as a guy that's been through it, I played an entire third period of a hockey game, didn't get scored on as a goaltender, not knowing where the hell I was. Like, that might say something to the caliber of hockey out in Northwestern Ontario, but, outside of that, and that's again why the spotters here, and that's their job. And again, I'm with you. The fact that I assumed this person was in the building. I was a little busy at work. I wasn't able to really read about it, but I assumed this person was in the building because, you've been in the building for a lot of football games. I've been in the building for a lot of football games. I'm sure our listeners have been in the building for a lot of football games. When a guy's hurt, this air gets sucked out of the room.
Yeah. And
you can just tell a guy's hurt. It's this weird sixth sense feeling, oh, geez, he is down. That guy should be in the room. Like, that guy should be in the building. Like, it's the easiest way to tell it. I mean, if you can get Chris Cuthbert and Rod Black and Rod Smith every angle on a monitor, have this guy hang out in a booth someplace. Give him a TV. Let him have a monitor if he wants. Let him pull a Terry Jones and sit in his own personal chair down below the bowels of the stadium and watching his own personal TV monitors TSN sets up for him. Like if Terry Jones can do it, let's do it for the concussion spotter. And the officials to miss that call.
Yeah. Well, I will. While it's bad and like Andre Prue's the only guy looking at the quarterback at that time, and things happen really fast, so I give them a slight break. It's obviously absolutely a play that should have been called, but the mistake is not nearly as glaring as the spotters, as far as I'm concerned.
No. And the other mistake here too, Joel, is remember when they said that you're going to have this off-field official that's able to call something into the guys and everybody was all up in arms about that. Nothing seems to have happened with that. Like that.
They only seem to be willing. That only seems to come into play on like minor things like false starts and offsides and ball placement and that sort of thing for whatever reason. It seems like on challengeable plays. I don't know if it's written in the rule that way, but on challengeable plays, it seems like they're not really involved.
Which is ridiculous in itself. So now you have the on-field officials who, I'm with you. This was not Andre Prue's fault. Things that happen at full. We have the benefit of like I am right now. I am less than 5 feet away from a 55-inch high-def television.
Yeah.
That I can slow down, I can pause, I can watch some TSN replays. Andre Prue doesn't get that. Okay.
Yeah, so he will make a mistake. He made a mistake, and I'm sure he would admit that he made a mistake, and that will show in his report card, and he will face whatever consequences that come of that. But football is so fast now. It happens so fast, and yes, it's head jerked, but your head jerks and you get hit in the chest too. So you can't know exactly 100% all the time. My bigger problem with how the flag came about was more so around the challenge rules, that Chris Jones basically had to use his only challenge on this because they changed the rule last year, which I think was a good change at the time to one challenge per game. But I think
I would agree.
I think they need to tweak it, and I thought this for a while now. It should be okay. They got the kind of the fishing expeditions are more or less gone unless you only have one challenge left and there's a minute left in the game and you're desperate for something, which at that point, whatever.
Which is fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fishing expedition is basically gone. My theory for the challenge is, and this would help Chris Jones in the scenario, is as long as you're right, why can't you keep challenging?
Right. And it's almost like what the NFL does.
Well, the NFL, you get two right, you get a third one.
Exactly.
And you're unlikely to challenge more than 2 plays in a game anyway. Really?
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. And if like you said, if the rule's in place and if you get one wrong, you're done. You are still going to get rid of the fishing expeditions. The only one that worries me on a rule like that would be, you'd see the guys willing to throw it on a 50-50 catch in the first quarter while guys are maybe keeping that in their pocket and letting the game flow.
Well, that's what I mean. If you're wrong, you're done. But if you're right, why can't you keep challenging?
No, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of the blame, too, needs to fall on that off-field official. Magic, mysterious, deal or no deal character that allegedly sits and watches the game and can call things in. Like, if you're serious about this, like, how does that person not have the ability to call down and say, yeah, hey, Andre, I know that was full speed, but man, that guy got hit in the head.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is something that the league needs to eliminate in the term of concussions, and the fact that you have a guy whose job it is to be the second line of defense for the officials, either unable or unwilling to make that call, is another part of the, as you said, total systematic failure of what was that hit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it poked a lot of holes in a system that, while has been improving, clearly shows it still has a long ways to go. And a lot of people were questioning the fact as to why Odell Willis was even still in the game after that. And that comes down to the fact that there isn't really the tools in place unless he happened to punch Zach Collaros in the head, or they felt that there was, he had intent. There was really nothing else they could have done besides eventually give him the 15-yard penalty. There's no real mechanisms in place. There's no targeting rule like there is in the NCAA to eject a player for that. Now, should that be a rule? I think so. I think if you really want to change the game in that regard, you will then punish players and teams stronger than just a 15-yard penalty. As bad as that is, if the BC Lions lose Odell Willis for the rest of that game, that changes a lot of things. That changes a lot of thinking in a player's mind.
Well, and you're absolutely right. I mean, look, the NFL essentially instituted that.
No, the NFL went a step too far with some of the ones they called earlier in the year, but regardless, yeah.
Right, but they seem to have figured it out now, right? I mean, players, I think the NFL did a very good job of identifying that, listen, you go head-on-head with a guy, you're gone. You got to, and you're absolutely right, Joel, in the preseason and some of the early NFL games, it was it was an utter disaster, but I think that utter disaster taught guys to play the game a little bit differently. You're seeing, and again, I'm also a Vikings fan, and I can tell you there's been some really questionable calls go in favor of my Minnesota Vikings this season. But you're starting to see now guys that'll get to a quarterback and bear hug him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and the officials are doing a good job of the quick whistle. So, to me, it's working in a professional league that, and I can't think of him, and I know you're a Steelers guy. We both watch a lot of NFL ball. I can't think off the top of my head, and normally you can, of any real scary head injury like moments from this season. Like, I mean, there's always going to be injuries, but I can't think of any of those hits that you watch on the highlights on Sunday night and go, oh my God, did he die?
Yeah.
I think if it's working in the NFL, which some could argue, I mean, yes, you're not going a yard off the ball. Yes, you're not getting the running start. Some will argue it's faster, which it is. I mean, the athletes are generally faster. I mean, but CFL, I love it to death. I prefer the brand of football, and I'll be the first to say that. But if it's worked down there, why can't it work up here? And that, to me, needs to not fall on the on-field officials. No. I don't think that's a decision that needs to be fully made by your on-field officials, because, again, if a call is missed or something, but you have this mystery man, the banker sitting in a back closet someplace, that's able to make these calls, that should be their job. Okay, Odell, that was head-on-head, although I believe from watching that replay, there was no intent.
No, absolutely not, no.
I mean, Odell Willis has had a very long career in the CFL, and I don't think is known as a dirty player. I don't think anybody would consider him a dirty player. Every player with a career that long on defense is going to have one or two hits that make you wince, but I just think that if they adopt the NFL rule and you press it hard in the preseason and you press it hard in the first few weeks of the regular season, maybe some of this goes away.
It's entirely possible, and I agree with you completely that there wasn't any intent on Odell Willis's part. I don't think he's not seen as that kind of guy. For the most part, I bet if you put together a spreadsheet of like all of Odell Willis's penalties throughout his career, a vast majority of them are probably just offside, because that's what he's known for. He's known for going offside. He's not known for throwing collision-worthy, very dirty hits. He's just generally offside. So.
Yeah.
And it brings up the interesting point that I read in the Regina Leader Post today, which was today on Tuesday, as they have a pretty interesting column every week from former Riders GM Brendan Taman. And he talked about all the points that we talked about to this point, but he led it to the point of, isn't Odell Willis really the villain here? And he went on to say, there's nothing personal against Odell. He's not known for this and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, yes, I see to a point that, yes, Odell really is the culprit here because he delivered the hit. But there's no use in really getting angry at Odell, because he faced the consequences that he could face within the system as it currently is. And as of tonight, recording on Tuesday night, I believe later in this week they will probably announce that he will have a fine against him, and that will be that. We move on. The real, the topic and the discussion and the issue, and maybe not the villain, so to speak, in this, but a byproduct of the villain is everything else that happened afterward.
Yeah. And no, you're absolutely right. Like, the leagues need to come out with a statement and to correct on what happened. It's just, the whole thing's a gong show.
Absolutely.
The whole thing's a complete gong show, and I hope at every level the league learns from it.
They should, and we've harped on the league a lot for this today, but I do think the league will learn from this, and they will hopefully make some adjustments to make sure that such a massive failure doesn't happen again. So where this leaves us now is, where does this leave the Saskatchewan Roughriders? And there's still a chance that they could have 2 bye weeks in a row, depending on what happens this week between Calgary and BC, which right now probably could be...
My hot take is right.
Yeah, and that could be a really good thing for this team right now, because we saw the rest of that game without Zach Collaros, where they only allowed Brandon Bridge to attempt, I believe, like 8-9 passes, and he had fewer yards than Zach Collaros had in a quarter. And, we've talked a lot about the offense of this team this year, and... can they win a playoff game without him? That's the question now. If he can't go, is this whole season that's looked relatively promising at times, especially the last couple of weeks, is it down the tubes? And are they one and done without Zach Collaros?
Possible John Fraser cold take alert? Absolutely. I think without Zach Collaros, they're absolutely one and done. Like, Brandon Bridge has regressed to the point I don't think he could have started on my flag football team where I was the backup. He doesn't look good. His confidence is obviously shaken. They don't seem to drop a set of plays for him. I'm going to go on the record and say, if Collaros cannot start, which, again, going back to my history of head injuries, I don't think you can possibly tell me that a person that's had his 3rd head injury in about 5 months should or could start next week. Even in 3 weeks' time, 2 weeks' time. I mean, I don't think he should. I don't think he will. And I really think, even with the double bye, I think we've seen the last of Zach Collaros this season, just based on 3 head injuries in 5 months. I know the defense is great. The defense is great. They've had a few off games, but that defense on a Brandon Bridge-led team is going to be absolutely exhausted, because it's just going to be, again, to name drop my own podcast, it's going to be 2 and out after 2 and out after 2 and out after 2 and out. They can't get anything going. I think the wind would be completely sucked out of Mosaic. Like, if you come out New Mosaic and they're playing the Bombers, Winnipeg scores early. Even if they don't score early, Winnipeg scores early. You watch Brandon Bridge go out there, and if Cameron Marshall can't repeat what he did with 150 yards, which I think Winnipeg would be very keyed on his running attack, and I think they'd be able to limit him. I see Mosaic Stadium being very quiet. I see Mosaic Stadium not being sold out. And I see the Riders being one and done. Zach Collaros, although nowhere near what he used to be, we have seen some flashes of it, is a good game manager and can lead them to a victory. And I would pick the Riders over my own favorite team. This isn't a reverse jinx. This is me using my brain as a football guy. With Zach Collaros, without, they're one and done, no matter who they play. Whether that's the West Final, whether that's the West Semifinal, I can't see a scenario in which they win without Zach Collaros.
I can. I still can. Just because I am, from what I've learned from this season, if anything, is to never count this team out. They have always found a way to win football games that they have no business winning, and there's no reason to believe that couldn't happen again. Now, I'm not saying I would necessarily lean that way. I'm not saying what you're saying is completely untrue, but I'm never willing to count this team out no matter the circumstances. And if they do get the running game going, if the defense gets going, if the special teams get going, I mean, it's certainly entirely possible. And, we're talking hypotheticals here because we don't really know what the status of Zach Collaros is, and they have no reason to tell us anything this week because they're on a bye week this weekend. So I don't expect any information this week. And if BC does beat Calgary, I don't expect any information next week. So really, we could go 2 weeks of radio silence, at least on the front of Zach Collaros, and we won't have a clue what's going on. And maybe he does play. I know you're convinced because of your head injuries that, he might not play, maybe he shouldn't play, and that very well could be the case, but, everyone's different. Maybe he does recuperate in time. It's not out of the realm of possibility because he has come back twice this year to head injuries already. Maybe he'll be okay. You just don't know how one human being will react to something compared to someone else. Like, your own circumstances aren't transferable to everyone.
Right. No. Yeah. You're absolutely right, and that's why from where I speak is from a guy that's had lingering issues. Maybe you're right. Maybe Zach bounces back way quicker than my soft noodle brain. You're right. I speak, and again, and I think I've explained it through this podcast, where I come from on the issue because of what I've been through. And I am obviously heavily biased because of that. I make the assumption that I went through this, so obviously Collaros must be going through this, and how the hell could he possibly play? How the hell could he possibly want to play in 3 weeks' time, risking his long-term health, right? Yeah, you're right. He might be fine. He might be the kind of guy that can take some smelling salts, rub some dirt on it, and doesn't have a soft, mushy brain like I do. I honestly believe that they have, if they're not the favorite at this point, I would at worst call them a co-favorite for the Grey Cup with Zach Collaros. I just don't see it with Brandon Bridge. I don't.
Oh, that's entirely fair. That's another point. I think they're capable of winning a playoff game that way. If Collaros is by chance done longer term, can they win 2-3 games? Probably not. The defense would have to be stupendous beyond belief for 3 games in a row, which is hard to ask of that, especially this time of year. Once you have a whole season of wear and tear on you, that's hard to ask. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. But I would be stunned. Now,
Trent Dilfer's got a Super Bowl ring, right?
Exactly. And you did bring up one interesting comment that I wanted to touch on a little bit in the middle of your talk there, on the status and with Brandon Bridge, and that's the game not being sold out. And we've already seen, the rallying begin to try to sell tickets for this game. As if you remember in 2013, the last time the Riders hosted a home playoff game, their West semifinal game against BC was the lowest attended game of the year, lower than the preseason game, which means absolutely nothing. And we've already seen the team's director of marketing making the rounds in local media, trying to drum up people to say, hey, come buy tickets for this game, whether it's, especially if it's this week, you should get them now, or, at least to think about it for this week or next, depending on what's going on, because we need your support and blah, 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 blah. I'm not getting into all that, but it speaks again, and this is a conversation that's been going on league-wide forever, and it came up on the 3 Down chat that we have, a little group chat we have with some 3 Down contributors, because I brought up the point that before the game last week for the Riders against the BC Lions, a game where they had a chance to clinch their first home playoff game in 5 years, I was told before the game by someone that they had barely scratched 30,000 tickets sold, which isn't a bad number. Like, league-wide, it's pretty good, but that's still a game you probably should be selling out under most circumstances. And they barely scratched 30. Based on what I saw, I'm not sure there's actually any people there, so they probably papered it a little bit to get over that number. Oh, and walking up to the stadium, because it was windy and kind of miserable a little bit before the game started, they didn't have any of the pregame tailgate stuff out. So this leads to the usual question, why are we playing regular season games at this time of year?
We shouldn't be. We absolutely should not be. If I get it that back in the day, and this is, I think, where a lot of the sentiment comes from, that, football used to be tough and rabble. Back in the day, your only other options were listening to the game on the radio with friends, which you don't see anything, you have no visual stimuli, or watching probably a 36-inch old tube TV where,
if that big.
Yeah, exactly. If you were lucky, you had a 36-inch tube TV. Maybe one of your buddies had a big screen. You could go over to his house, right? In today's day and age, there are 3 high-definition TVs in my house right now. Again, I'm sitting 5 feet away from my pride and joy, my 55-inch high-def TV in my basement. So the thought of me, again, guy in his 30s, I can't take my 3-year-old to a playoff game. It's too damn cold.
Yep.
He just would not enjoy himself. My wife does not want to go to a playoff game when it's too damn cold. Okay. So now I am left with the option of going myself. Or left with the option of settling on my couch, like I am now, turning on my high-def TV. I can see my beer fridge from here. In fact, during the middle of this podcast, I went and grabbed a pile of Bones cranberry kettle sour.
Yeah, it wasn't subtle. We definitely heard it.
Oh, it's true. But how quick did that take? Right? I didn't have to get a beer vendor. I didn't have to get anything. I just walked over to my beer fridge that I wanted a curling bonspiel, and away we go.
And the good beer isn't sold out before the game even starts.
Exactly. It's because white IPA is magical, and we've already discussed that several times. I think to stay relevant, because of the entertainment options and the affordability now of such high-quality television, and the way the game has changed, the angles you have now, the high def and everything you have access to, I absolutely think that the league is doing itself a disservice by not moving the schedule up. And I don't care. This isn't about toughness. You shouldn't have to be tough to be entertained. Nobody makes you go to a rock concert and say, oh, by the way, we're going to turn the thermostat up to 120 here so you can sweat it out and see how long you last. Like, that's what you sound like right now when you say be tough and go to a football game.
Yeah.
Like, just think about that. Like, to be entertained, you have to put yourself through a little bit of hell in preparation. Well, alternatively, you can sit on your ass on the couch, drink all the beer you want, and enjoy. I would like to see. Honestly, I think we should be doing a Grey Cup preview episode this week.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, and let's be clear. Like I understand when every time this conversation comes up, there is a lot that needs to be sorted out for this to happen. You know, TSN obviously has to be on board.
Right.
Say yes to 2 broadcasters in 2021. That would help. Yeah. So there's that. There's, where does the draft fall after that? There's a lot of other things that need to be sorted out. So this isn't simply just moving the schedule up a month and everything else continues on as is. There's a lot of moving parts to this, but I think as a grand discussion, it's one still that needs to be had because by far and large, the CFL is still a great gate-driven league. The TSN money is nice right now, but they still need more money on top of that, especially the teams that are still losing money with that pretty decent TSN money. Yeah. So They need, and yes, we know there's still a chance for terrible weather in October as we see it, but I think, far more people are probably more likely to spend a little bit of money, at least, maybe not families and stuff, but far more people are probably more likely to spend money to go sit in lousy weather for a Western final than they are a regular season game. So yes, the weather could still be miserable, but at least all of your regular season games should be played under fairly decent conditions that will allow more people to want to come out to games, which not only helps your finances, makes the league look better, because when you're watching, if you're a casual fan deciding whether you want to go to a game or not, and all of a sudden you're watching a game late in the year, it's the biggest game of the year, and it's this team's smallest crowd of the year, you're thinking, what kind of league is this? What's going on here?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, and a good example is, let's look back to your wedding weekend. It was cold, it was miserable, it was raining, but if that was a playoff game, I think people still attend. Now, on the other side of the coin, the Saturday after your wedding, beautiful day. Yeah. Beautiful. Like 12 degrees and sunny. That's exactly what you want. If you have to throw a couple hoodies on under your green and white jersey, great. That's the way it should be. I've been an advocate of this since I've had a platform to be an advocate of this, and I just think it's silly that. And I'm with you. I get it. There's a ton of moving parts, but I think there's easy solutions to all that. I mean, maybe the CFL draft becomes more like the NFL, the MLB draft, that you don't really see guys that are drafted till maybe late in the season, till next season. Maybe that's a part of it, but I just think it's silly that the league at some point whatever TSN says. I mean, to me, again, here I am gushing over my basement setup. If you give me the option to be outdoors on a beautiful May, June, July night, watching football in the best football stadium in arguably North America, the best outdoor football stadium in North America, I'm taking that every day of the week. I am taking that every day of the week. If my options are right now, well, when I left for curling tonight at about 6 o'clock, it was 3 degrees outside, or sitting again with a cozy blanket and a hoodie on. I'm going to take that any day of the week. So again, it's funny that again the teams least attended games, and this is a league wide thing. Anywhere that's outdoor, the league, they're drawing worse than preseason games. Yeah, you need to look in the mirror and fix it. And
people talk about, well, if you move the season up, let's say 3 weeks, you could have more games against the NHL playoffs. So what? So maybe you're in Winnipeg and there's one bomber game early in the year is affected by a Jets game late in the Jets Stanley Cup final game, and no one shows up. Yeah, that looks bad, but at least it's week 2. It's not no one showing up to a game in week 20.
But even with that, like, I can tell you, as a guy that went to a Jets playoff game, the price of a Jets playoff ticket, what I paid, I'm doing that once. Yeah. Like, and I make some pretty decent coin. And I'm doing that once. Or if you got to have some flexible scheduling. It's pretty easy. Put the schedule out. If you're Winnipeg, if you're Toronto, if you're Ottawa.
Not Ottawa, you're not worried about that.
I know. That's why I laughed. If you're any Canadian team, put out flexible scheduling. If there's a Stanley Cup playoff game at 7 p.m. on a Saturday, flex your game to 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Like, because I know, I can guarantee you, and again, me as a sports fan, me as a lover of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Winnipeg Jets, when I went to Winnipeg for that playoff game, had I had the option to go to a Bomber game, then to the Jets game, you're absolutely right. I would have taken that 10 times out of 10. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just a matter of just, like, using your head. Like, this all seems so simple, and I get it. There's so many moving parts, but, like, as a fan, as a podcaster, I get so frustrated that you can't just, like, use some GD common sense and go, okay, well, we just schedule the games to not run against playoff games. And what's your worst case scenario for the CFL and you do that? The worst case scenario would be an all-Canadian Stanley Cup final. Last time I checked, you would still have 8 right now, 9 very soon other cities that aren't impacted. Like, that are completely not impacted. Like, what's going to be worse for your gate? The fact it's minus 10 outside for your playoff game and nobody's buying tickets? Or the fact that a hockey game might be on down the street, that it's $400 a pop for lower bowl tickets? I would say it's the latter, not the former.
Yeah. Yeah, and again,
I am oddly angry tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's always good when you're angry. So one fan base we don't know how they will react to the weather yet is the potential new one out in the Maritimes in Halifax. It seems like another key hurdle has been passed there as we take a little bit of a look around the league right now. And the question is, it seems like, and you want to talk about this a little bit, that there is actually, we're a step closer to a stadium in Halifax, which would create balance across the league, which creates a whole other new scheduling thing that I'd love to get into at one point in time, because I think it could really solve this East-West talk that we always have. But anyway, like this is the closest we've ever gotten, and I still think we need to temper our expectations, and literally, I think, until they actually kick off a football in Halifax. But yeah, this is still, some noteworthy sort of positive news for this league.
Well, I think the Halifax Fighting Lobsters, the only thing holding a team from being out to, like, let's face it, if anybody in Atlantic Canada had a facility, it'd be done already. Mm-hmm. You've now got some real money behind it. I think this league desperately needs a 10th team, and I am salivating at the possibility And I would love to see the league do this 1 week. Maybe it's Labor Day. Maybe it's to open your season. Could you imagine 5 different football games, 5 different time zones, a full day of football across Canada? How cool would that be?
Oh, I talked about that on Twitter during one of the triple headers. I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
Now they'd probably have to call you to do play-by-play because I don't know if there's enough guys. But then again, if they're on 2 networks, that solves the problem.
It's true. Or you're absolutely right. Or I just come out of retirement and do the thing I've always wanted to do, and I'm better than certain people that are currently doing it at their job. So, again, I'll make that hot take right here. I can say I think it'll be great for the league. I like to see, from my understanding, I read the article on our website. From my understanding, it looks like they've approved where the stadium can go, and I look forward to making the trek out to Halifax for a game one day. I'm really optimistic. I think there's a great fan base out there, and again, just the possibility of being able to go Halifax all the way to BC is so friggin' cool that I hope it happens, and it looks like it's going to happen, and I can't wait for the official announcement, especially because, let's face it, Joel, perhaps the best party at every single Grey Cup I've been to has been the unnamed Atlantic team party. I remember getting real zesty, as I call it, and having a lobster roll stuffed into my mouth hole at the 2013 Grey Cup, and just for that reason alone, you deserve a team.
And I think we're going to leave it at that.